Hello everyone, I'm Tristão from the State University of Campinas in Brazil, and today I'm going to present to you some of the preliminary results of my master's thesis in a work we named Global Problem, Local Impact, Cultural Uses of Amazon Trees Beyond the Climate Threat. So for a context, we know today that the Amazon rainforest is the greatest tropical forest in the world, and it sustains about 30 million people who directly or indirectly depend on the contributions of the forest. Between those contributions can be cited food supply, raw material, and medicinal inputs that are going to be assessed here in this work. So the human populations have managed those useful tree species among centuries, and the displacement or local extinction of it due to climate change can break cultural ties built up over those centuries of management. So for that, species distribution modeling can act as a useful tool to assess possible consequences of climate changes on local relevant species. So our main goal is to assess habitat displacement of useful tree species in relation to sustainable protected areas in the Brazilian Amazon under two future climate scenarios. For that, we assess 29 tree species among the over 400 tree species from the Amazon phase plots, and those 29 can be related simultaneously with the tree ecosystem services, food supply, raw material, and medicinal input. For those species, we also assessed their occurrence data from the BIF database, which can be represented here by this map in the left. And we also assessed the climate data from the CMIP6 model from World Clean database for two future scenarios described by IPCC AR6 as SSP 4.5 and 8.5. Both of them were assessed in the midterm period of between 2041 and 2060. For our analysis, we use the species distribution model from the SDM package and the R language. So some of our results are represented here by those maps on the right, and we can discuss some points. First is that although there is habitat loss in both scenarios, the loss is greatest in SSP 8.5. So here the red stems represents the habitat losses modeled. And we can see that in the SSP 8.5, we can have greater stems, huge stems, and stems with a more intense color that can represent more species being locally lost. Also, the greatest losses are within indigenous areas that are represented here by these blue lines. So the greatest lost areas, habitat loss areas, are within the indigenous areas boundaries. So that can represent in both scenarios a huge loss for the culture of traditional Brazilian people. The third point we can show here is that most of the modeled habitat gain under future climates are in the Amazon arc of deforestation, where the forest is constantly replaced by monocultures. So here we can see a big gray stem that can represent a habitat gain of those species. So places where those species can occur more intensely. But those areas also are called the arc of deforestation in Amazon, because we have a huge, intense deforestation for the expansion of monocultures. Also, the displacement of habitat and decrease of species local density used for food can pose threats to food security in the short term. So populations who depend on those species for feeding can be affected in a few years from now. Also, in a short, medium term, losses of habitat of other species as Dipteryx odorata, locally known as kumaru, may represent economic vulnerability. So Dipteryx odorata and other species among those 29 are locally relevant for the economy of those people. And their losses can have many consequences on the local economy. At last, in the medium-long term, the locally extinct species may be replaced by others with similar use by human populations. But the cultural knowledge, technologies, and use associated may be lost, because the obtention of knowledge of how to use these species and also the technologies that can help the populations to use those species are things that take time to be developed. So even if we have a substitution of some species by other that can provide the same ecosystem services, we need the cultural knowledge and technologies associated with the use, so this use can be available. So here are some of our results, and this is a work in progress. We still have a lot of land to cover and a lot to discuss and assess, but for now, these are my contributions. Thank you.